Hey class, the second video that I am going to share with you today is on the agenda for our Kaizen event. So you can see here on my screen, this is the actual agenda that we used for our event over the 2 days that we had the Kaizen this week. And this is really where a lot of the time and effort goes into in planning for a Kaizen event, is really kind of laying down the roadmap, which is essentially this agenda. And you can see this agenda has a lot of detail in it as far as the actual times we're going to start and the duration of each of the different elements. And then also who's going to facilitate, who's the discussion leader, and then just some comments to kind of just have a little bit additional information on what it is we're trying to focus on for each of these agenda items. And so I'm just going to quickly kind of run through this agenda, but essentially you can see from the way the agenda is laid out, it goes through this approach of using DMAIC, of defining, measuring, analyzing, improving. And we don't get to control typically in a Kaizen event, but essentially the milestones in a Kaizen event, at least the ones that I've been working on over the last few years and using this Lean Six Sigma approach, follow that defining, measuring, analyzing, improving, controlling framework in phases. So the initial start of the session, like I had talked about in the pre-meeting with the champion, was really about 10 or 15 minutes of the champion coming in and discussing, what this Kaizen event is all about, his expectations, and this champion did an awesome job. I wish I could have recorded him and shared the video with you guys, but he came in and talked about how he had worked in South Africa at another location within this company and that was really struggling, and how he really challenged the processes and looked for opportunities to make improvements. And one thing that he really hit on that actually led perfectly into the intro that I actually did following him was that this group of individuals, talking about what they are paid to do, what it is that they do for this business. And a lot of people think that they come to work and their goal is just to maintain the status quo, and when in actuality, our goal for most people in most organizations is to get better at what we're doing. So we're paid to make improvements, to identify opportunities for improvement that ultimately keep us ahead of our competition. And so it was a great segue into me talking about some of these similar ideas. So the champion just came in and said, your job here is to make improvements and identify opportunities to get better. And why is it important? Because we're in a business where we're competing with lots of other competitors. It's a commodity type based business, and if we don't stay ahead of the competition, we're going to get eliminated. And so it was a great segue into kicking off this session. Then we got into the second area that is just kind of getting the team together and focused on building a little camaraderie. And so I did a little team building exercise, and I'll share that with you in another video. And then getting into an overview of what is Lean Six Sigma, what is Kaizen. So not that we need to completely educate these individuals in these Kaizen events about all the tools and techniques of Lean and Six Sigma and Kaizen, but they need to kind of understand the end game of where we're shooting for. What are we going to be doing over the next few days, and what's the process we're going to use? And then getting into the next step, which was the define phase, and looking at this company calls it the contract, but a lot of times we call it the charter. And this is just framing up the opportunity. What is it? What problem or opportunity are we here to focus in on? And how are we going to measure that problem? And what is our vision of success? What are we trying to do in relationship to our primary metric? Are we trying to, in this case, this project was all about cleaning out a big tank that has a bunch of petroleum product in it. And every 15 years or so, they need to clean these tanks out. And so our project this Kaizen was focused on how can we quickly do that and remove all of this stuff inside this tank very quickly so that we can start using it again. Because when the tank is not being used and it's being cleaned out, we're losing revenue. And so this whole thing was about how quickly can we remove material from inside this tank and get it back online. And so their primary metric was cubic yards per day, which is just cubic yards of the stuff they're taking out of this tank. So we talked about that's what we're going to measure, is cubic yards per day. And our baseline was the next thing we talked about in the measure phase here, where we zoomed in on what's the current state. We're currently able to remove about 170 cubic yards per day, and that's where our starting point is. And our goal is to improve on that by 10%, and that 10% in this case was worth about $500,000. And then from there we got into the analyze phase at the end of the first day. So we started to look at the downtime in this process, because if we can remove the downtime, we can remove time that it takes us to clean this tank, and if we can do it quicker, we can remove more material it's going to lead us to success. So the first day was really finished by going through and analyzing root causes, using the downtime tool to understand where do we have opportunity for improvement. And so at the end of that day, we ended up brainstorming and just using post-it notes and putting them up on the wall and going through and brainstorming all the defects, all the production, all the waiting, not using people well, going through that whole downtime acronym. And I'll share that in another video showing you exactly how we kind of facilitated that session. And so that was the end of the first day. We had essentially a full list of all the causes of the problem. And then on the second day, we got into zooming in on the ones that had the biggest impact. So we came up with 100 and I think it was 32 causes. And we said, okay, we can't fix 132 problems and not all of them are worth fixing. Which one should we focus in on? And so that's what we did. And I'll share that in this second video of the process that we used to kind of narrow it down to a few. And then we started to look at solutions to the few that we thought had the most impact and built an action plan and then presented that out to the champion at the end of our session. So this is just a pretty boilerplate approach. Most of the Kaizen events I do typically follow the standard approach of define, measure, analyze, improve. And at the very end, we present out an action plan. Sometimes we actually implement the action plan right there on the spot, but that's not typical. And so now this team is tasked with over the next 30 days to implement their action plan. So in a nutshell, that's essentially what we did over the 2 days. Now in the next couple of videos, I'll share with you some of the tools and the techniques and how we facilitated the session and show you the actual examples and some pictures that may help illustrate kind of the process that we went through to go from 100 and some root causes down to just a handful, and then an action plan to get those root causes to be less of an issue or to eliminate some of them if possible.